Welcome to the Captains and Coaches Podcast. My name is Tex McQuilkin. I am your host, and I get the opportunity to sit down with Coach CJ Appenzeller at the Super Coach Summit. CJ and I were both presenters at this event, and it was an amazing opportunity. I got to learn more about ATS, Appenzeller Training Systems, 3 facilities that he owns and operates in South Jersey. Best gyms in South Jersey. We also explore how CJ takes the approach of introducing and solving performance and return to play problems. He does an amazing job painting this picture on his Instagram, Appy Hour, at APPY Hour. A must follow. This conversation, we dive into the anatomy and physiology of return to play, how to navigate that conversation with both athletes and parents, allowing them to understand that full athlete's journey. This conversation is also anchored in a lot of leadership, as CJ was a Division III All-Star, as well at Shenandoah University. We spoke to his freshman year captain, all the way to lessons that he's applying with the team that he's leading at his 3 facilities in South Jersey. Quick shameless plug, this episode is brought to you by Old Bull, the program, delivered through Train Heroic. I'm having a great time writing this one for you. This is a flexible, efficient, effective strength and conditioning program where you choose your own adventure, and I also sprinkle in self-leadership lessons so you begin to expand your abilities, not just physically, but also mentally, emotionally, and then apply all the lessons that you're learning into your life. Go ahead and give it a 7-day trial. Links in the show notes. But without further ado, let's hand it off to CJ. Ready.
Tex-Mex, let's ride.
Action. Welcome to Captains and Coaches Podcast. We are live on the scene.
On the scene.
We're wrapping up the Super Coach Summit in Western Virginia. Great time, great hospitality, and speakers, which includes this guest with me. We've got some awesome trading cards.
Hell yeah, dude. This is sweet. You look really handsome in this.
I know. I don't know where they got the picture. CGI. Or AI, whatever's going on now. But I'm with CJ Appenzeller, ATS Training Systems up in Jersey.
Dirty Jers.
Yeah, man. Opening up 3rd.
Yep,
venue.
so we have 1 ATS, and then we will have 3 total, 2 APTs, we call them, active personal training. Yep, so they're under a different name, a different umbrella, a little bit different target market. So our ATS people are athletes. Actually, our business started out as completely athletes, transitioned to having adults, hosting adults as well. Then our active personal training branches are adult-only, 40-plus-year-olds.
There you go.
Yep.
So an evolution of the business as you get into it, but you got into it for specifically working for athletes.
Athletes, yeah. And initially it was all baseball guys. And it's become baseball and fighters and return to play, essentially, is kind of like the markets we still service. Myself as a coach, the only people I'm currently coaching because of my roles in leadership and in the business or stuff is true professional athletes or return to play athletes. Those are the guys and gals that I'm working with.
Yeah, special case high school level kids that they tried everything and now you get the opportunity to bring them back.
Correct.
Which is changing lives.
It's fun. Yep.
So, man, take us back to your athletic journey. I know we're both D3 All-Stars.
D3 All-Stars, JUCO Bandit, both.
JUCO Bandit. This is a new term for me.
Yep, and a D3 All-Star. Not really an All-Star, just a D3 guy.
Well, that's the joke.
Yeah.
Yes. We're all All-Stars.
Yep. So played outfield in college and was really, really in love with the game of baseball. Had a lot of fun. I was a grinder on the field. That's kind of what I did. And I think baseball, if anything, taught me that. It taught me work ethic. It taught me how to show up and try to be the hardest worker in the room or on the field, whatever the case may be. I actually got the offer to play at the school I played at, Shenandoah University in Virginia.
Hornets, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
Fly
we
Hornets
played
fly.
them.
Yep. And I actually got that offer because I literally went to a camp, and during BP, which baseball people know, like kind of just dog BP as a fielder. You kind of just shag. During BP, I was flying around laying out. I would run
Just
from
having fun.
yeah, I would run from center field, lay out for a ball like left center, catch, dive, get up, drop the ball, run the opposite direction, lay out again. Coach is like, what is wrong with this guy? But we love the hustle. We would love to have you here. So that's how I wound up there, which is pretty cool.
That is awesome. What did you study there?
Exercise physiology. I think there it was called kinesiology.
Oh, interesting.
Yep.
Yeah, I was a health science guy.
There you go. Yeah. I think it's all the same,
You're not wrong.
And now I'm a teacher. I'm a professor adjunct at another D3 school, Rowan University. And what's funny about that is we change the name of that program every single year.
And you're still teaching the same basics, essentially?
Yeah. I teach exercise physiology. I teach exercise prescription. And then we have a great lab class called Lab Personal Training where I just teach guys and gals how to coach, essentially.
Dude, that's amazing. So I was adjunct at my alma mater, Marymount, and it was the Foundations of Personal Training.
Yep.
And like we had a book associated with everything. And then it was like, all right, this is basically we're going to get you to pass the test.
Yep.
But then we're actually going to get hands-on.
Love that.
So then took him around my contacts in D.C. We visited different gyms that were personal training focused, group fitness focused.
Very cool.
And then exposed them to the different opportunities that fitness presents.
Yeah.
And then hit up performance weight rooms at Georgetown. So,
yeah, dude, that's a cooler class than I have. I can't even, maybe can't even isn't the right verbiage, but I haven't, right? No limitations, but I haven't taken our students off campus, and I'd love to. Seeing as I literally have 2 gyms within 40-minute drive.
With different styles.
With different styles, servicing different people. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's definitely something we need to at least look into because that's the biggest missing link, right? Coaches don't coach, and then they're kind of called on to have a bachelor's degree and like, hey, go ahead, run these athletes through or run this mom through, whoever they're servicing.
Yeah, and that it's assumed, and that's where we're going to spend a lot of time living in the podcast, is that those assumptions, whether it's coaching, whether it's leadership, because you're hired for this job based off your credentials, it's assumed that you can lead. It's assumed that you can coach.
Yep.
Similar vein, a high school kid or a college kid is given the title captain based off of fundamentals, hustle, whatever it may be.
Yep, hustle.
And it's assumed
yep.
that they now can change the behavior of their teammates and get them to act the same way that led them to that opportunity.
Yeah, it's a big gap.
It is a big gap.
Yep.
And that's why we're targeting it here.
Yeah.
So, I personally love baseball. Grew up a fan.
Nice.
And so but played football.
Okay.
But appreciated baseball just through my father. So with football, there's a direct correlation connection to weightlifting. If you do this, you will get bigger because you need to go through that person.
Yep.
With baseball, I don't feel that there's a training culture within the sport. And here you are running a facility focused on training for and preparing for the sport.
Yep.
So where did you find that connection for yourself personally that then led you to become a very passionate leader in that field, that industry, and put out some awesome content, Appy Hour on Instagram?
Yeah, thank you. So I think number one, to address the kind of the first point, is like it's murky because X plus Y does not always equal Z. However, with that being said, like the right performance metrics will have a significantly higher carryover onto the field. There's a conversation that's been going around this weekend between us kind of hanging out, this idea of dynamic correspondence, which is a very real subcomponent of the training culture and environment, number one. And number two, from a psychological perspective, and, as we're on captains and coaches, right, there's a significant buy-in factor when something looks a little bit like what they do on the field, right? So that's number one, right there. It is a murky culture, but it's starting to develop now. However, with that being said, you'll never have to convince a linebacker to wear pads out to practice. He wants to go hit, right? Much the same way, you're never going to have to convince a pitcher to go throw as hard as he can. They love that. You'll never have to convince a hitter to go swing, take BP. They love to hit. What you will have to do is have some level of influence to get them into the weight room because of this murky culture.
Mm-hmm.
So not only do you have to find some things that create buy-in, like we just kind of alluded to, with things that, carry a higher level of dynamic correspondence, but also you have to be able to educate and then demonstrate some level of metrics to keep them coming back day in and day out. So, we time sprint times, we do velocities for rotational med ball work, right? All these things, now we're metric driven, number one. Number two, wow, this stuff's kind of looking like what we do on the field. And then number three, now we can actually track that progress instead of saying, hey, looks better, right? And to go full circle on your question, I got into the weight room because I wasn't that good at baseball, right? So, I think a lot of D3 guys probably experience this where you're like, I can keep coming in here every single day and working really hard. I hope it works, but if not, I kind of like it anyway.
Right.
Right. And I can't go out to the field every single day and night. Once practice is over, it's kind of shut down. It's dark out. You got to go do something. So I would either be in the cafeteria or I'd be training.
Right.
Yeah,
the training culture, at least 20 years ago when I was in college for lacrosse, it also didn't exist.
Yep.
But then the only way I could find myself on the field was through the weight room. But then there was dudes that would just rip 100-mile-an-hour shots. And this is where I started to ask questions and really get into performance.
Yep.
Is that guy can't bench 185 pounds. He died, literally got rhabdo because from bench press, because just getting crushed by the weight, I had to deadlift it off him, and then he rips 100 miles an hour shots. It just never made sense to me.
Yep.
And I'm just repping 315, no big deal, and I can't break 80.
Yeah.
Question.
Yeah, and that's where really having an idea of not only what metrics am I trying to drive, right, but also what are the pieces of this puzzle that may formulate a bigger picture, right? So for us, it's about movement capacity, resiliency, and then performance. Meaning, if I don't have access to ranges that I need to access for elite level shooting velocity or throwing velocity or, actual barrel speed swinging a bat, well, I need to get that access first. Once I have that access, now maybe I can play with driving up some performance metrics that would be beneficial or provide some level of carryover. But before I have that capacity, I need to be able to do that. And then at the other side of this whole equation is this idea of resiliency and robustness. So if an athlete was like, hey, I already do X, I already throw 100 miles an hour, why should I train with you? Right? What do I hope to derive from that? Well, I hope to keep you on the field throwing 100. If you're already at the very top tier of your sport or very top tier of the performance metric that you look to drive forward, it's all about being able to repeat that over and over again while staying healthy and on the field, right? We talk about the best ability is availability. We can't do that without building up some level of movement capacity, some level of robustness, and hopefully some level of performance-driven metric.
Yeah, I like that term, robustness. And I mean, resilience, well defined, but then robustness, that's that opportunity to connect.
Yep.
The awesome that the dude, girl, boy, whoever is connected with.
Yeah.
And then where you're saying there, I can't help but remember a Kenny Powers quote. He was talking about lifting weights.
Yep.
Coach tried to tell me to go lift weights. I'm like, why should I pick that up? I already throw the ball faster than anything. Right?
Yep.
So
that's that level of connection right there.
It's heavy.
Yeah. Exactly. I want you to be able to continue to do that. I don't want you to do it one time. I don't want you to be off the field. That's what we talk about. That's what we conversate.
And you have the opportunity to connect with parents
before
catastrophe strikes.
Hopefully, yeah.
So speak to us about the different conversations, the prevention conversation, which can be had with coaches as well, versus the rehabilitation conversation.
Yeah, so nobody likes to have the prevention conversation. It's not sexy. It's not marketable. It's not very salesy. If you went to a sales training, I doubt that's what they would have you speak about. So what you have to do to hold on, at least in my mind, to hold on to your integrity and also really keep, an athlete first model, which is something I was literally just discussing, is you have to mention it. But I don't know if it's the focal point of your conversation with the parent. I think it's mentioned. And then the focal point of the conversation from a buy-in perspective with the parent journey is like, hey, I want this person, this athlete, to reach their absolute fullest potential, which has an embodiment of robustness and resiliency built in. But I think the sexier thing, the thing that they really want to hear about is like, is he going to throw harder? Is he going to run faster? What's his 60 time going to do? And then I have to have the other side of that conversation quite a bit with athletes who have never worked with me before, never worked with my business before, who come to us from a physical therapist or from a chiropractor referral. Hey, this kid is quote unquote cleared, but there's a bridge to cross here before they can go back out onto the field, throw as hard as they want or sprint as fast as they want. And that's really, again, that's where I kind of come in now. That's a different conversation, and a conversation parents are now ready to have. Because unfortunately, as you put it, catastrophe has already struck. Now I get to have this educational conversation that I wish I could have had with you 6, 9, 12 months ago, depending on what the severity of the injury. But unfortunately, nobody wants to hear until it's too late.
So in line with that, speak to us about the mental performance, like the trust in your own body side, and both are you preparing them to be resilient if they're healthy? And then is there any different conversation you're having when they're on that injured side, the return?
Yeah, so there actually is. And like the conversations you have with every single athlete are unique, right? Because one of the best things I ever heard, it was probably 12 years ago from another coach, was like, hey, some athletes need a kick in the ass and some athletes need a pat on the head. And I'm like, man, I love that conversation, right? Because there are some athletes you'll have to connect with. And depending on the level of coach you are and kind of where you are in your business and your professional life, you might only work with one type of athlete. Like you might really select like, hey, I'm really only going to work with the guys who need a kick in the ass. Like I'm only going to work with, and we know some coaches like that. Both of us do, Tex, that like I pick this athlete. I pick this archetype of athlete to work with, which is great. But for me, I work with a pretty diverse group of athletes where some athletes really truly need a pat on the head, right? They need me to instill confidence in them each and every day on both sides, from a performance driven model and a return to play model. And then on the flip side of that, I also deal with athletes who need a kick in the ass, and I think as a casual kind of viewer or someone who doesn't work with elite athletes yet, or maybe wants to later, or whatever the case may be, you would be shocked to find out how many of the highest performers, people you watch on TV compete, need a pat on the head.
Oh, yeah.
Need love. And that's when we get into this whole discussion around the athlete journey and the athlete coach relationship, which is really what we're trying to do. I spoke this weekend here, and my number one goal when I work with an athlete, I fancy myself really smart. I fancy myself a really good coach. I fancy myself someone who knows the X's and O's intimately. But my number one goal is to have an impact.
Yeah.
And I can't have an impact without opportunity, and I can't have opportunity without a relationship with the athlete. So that's my number one goal. So I think the question was like, how do you talk to them? And it's really impossible for me to sum it up because it's such a unique conversation and journey with each and every person that walks through the door.
Yeah. In line with that, they're relate. I aim to almost develop a process for teaching a lot of emotional quotient, the EQ, and number one is relate.
Yes.
So if you as a coach have a hard time relating with, say, I want to work with college football or I want to work with rowing, swimming, whatever, that sport because you love the sport.
Yep.
But then you're in these different weight room environments, D1, pro, D3, high school, doesn't matter, and you're challenged to have relationships with those athletes, you may not want to be there.
Yeah.
Because the rest of the stuff down the line after that first step is extremely difficult. Holding them responsible, having tough conversations. If you don't have a relationship or you have trouble relating to them, it's going to be a long road.
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't think you can have those conversations without the backbone
Well,
first.
I mean, you can have the conversations, but do
It's
they
not going to
listen?
land. Yeah. Those planes aren't going to land. Those planes are missing in action, Bermuda Triangle style.
Yeah.
I 100% agree with you. And I think for me, sometimes it's hard, especially, 13 years into the industry, when you have a high school kid who you're having because as good as I am and all those things, we still struggle at times, right? That's the reality of being human, right? We still struggle to relate with a kid. And when you do that, you almost want to skip steps. You almost want to pull rank, and say, do you know who I've helped? Do you know what I've done? It's like, none of that shit lands if you try it, number one. Number two, but that's like, those are the mental gymnastics you do on a day-to-day basis where you're like, all right, let me take a step back, find the common ground here. Let me see what is actually going through this athlete's mind right now in terms of what he thinks he needs, where he is currently in his journey or his development as an individual, as a human. maybe aside from the athlete side, and see where I can kind of bridge this gap.
So, yeah, I'm aiming to, again, create a methodology within EQ.
Yeah.
So relating on the coach's part, that's a high self-awareness.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to try different things, and a social awareness because I'm seeing if stuff lands or not, and I can read that.
Yep.
So then in parallel with the relationship, it's also a self-awareness on part of the athlete. Because if they have low self-awareness,
Yep.
a lot of the adjustments, the coaching is not going to get applied. If I'm asking for certain adjustments within their foot position, say on a change of direction or a squat, and they come back to me as coach saying, I wasn't doing that, or I was.
Yeah.
Or my favorite is the ampy turner, and I've had kids lose their cool about this if they only turn on the right foot.
Yeah.
So they change direction on 5-10-5 with the right foot. Then they come across the 10-yard right foot again. So I have to say, like, hey, you're going to face me. Everybody's facing me on this rep.
Yep.
So then we get both turns, and then just call a kid out. Say, hey, Ryan, I need you, like, face me the whole time.
Yeah.
I was. I wouldn't be saying if it weren't true.
Yep.
So just that low awareness, now I know I got to lean into him more.
Yep.
Than the rest of the kids that are in tune at that moment in time. So that self-awareness, in line with that, what's a way that you test the kids? It could be viewed as coordination, right? Coachability, all these different things. How do you test their self-awareness so then you gauge of what coaching you pressured you need to apply?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think it's multifactorial. Number one, I think everything, and this is going to be, I think we talked about this earlier, this is going to be a reflection piece for me, right? So if Ryan in that exact same situation says, hey, I was, for me, where am I dropping the ball in terms of this coaching relationship currently? It's acute, it's silly, it's all those things, but it's happening, right? Mm-hmm. Because I either coached it or I allowed it to occur, which means I wasn't very clear on my details and or my coaching ability, or now A, or B, I probably now have an understanding, as you said, like, man, this kid needs a little bit more. Mm-hmm. What I currently already am providing is not enough. So number one, I like to reflect back on like kind of myself first. Before I ever go outward, I want to go inward. And that's something actually I learned from talking shit, weirdly enough. So
you?
Yeah, crazy enough. So I was walking through New York City with Mark Fisher, who's a prominent name, probably not maybe for your listeners, but in the fitness industry from a business perspective. And I was talking shit, and Mark looked at me, and he was kind of like nodding as if he were agreeing.
You were teasing Mark.
No, I was talking shit about a third party.
Okay.
Which, again, this was a defining moment in the way I approach coaching and my life, which is crazy because Mark and I, this was the first time we ever met. And he's kind of like agreeing with me, He's kind of nodding his head, or at least I'm thinking he's agreeing with me. I'm like, yeah, he's loving this shit, right? So I'm going to keep talking a little shit. And he looks at me and he goes, I used to think that too. In my head, I went, cash register, I'm the man. Mark Fisher, this prominent figure, agrees with me about this other person. We team hate, right? And then he looks at me, he goes, then I remembered, like, everything that I see as a fault in another person is probably me being reflective of something I'm missing in my own self. And I wanted to jump in front of traffic in New York City. I was embarrassed in that moment. And I also made a cognitive effort from then on, moving forward, when I was coaching and when I'm talking shit, to try to identify, like, where is the thing that I see in this person that I'm talking about, I'm pointing out to them, that is probably missing in me.
Yeah.
It's probably a reflection, right? As humans, we only see in others what we also possess within ourselves. Whether or not we're showing that at that time, that's left to be determined, right?
Yeah.
But that's a thing. So I think that was a long-ass answer for number one. And then number two, like, how do I test that emotional stability, it just takes time. Mm-hmm. Right? I don't know that I have, and maybe I should, but I don't know that I have like a standardized procedure for how I test the actual level of coachability of an athlete other than time in the trenches. Spend time, which is one of the reasons it's so hard for me as a business owner now to jump back in and coach at the level that I want to when I do coach, because I don't coach so much. It's like, man, that time on the floor, everybody, time in the trenches. But from a communication standpoint, it's so important. There's nothing that can, overshadow that. And that's one of the biggest hurdles of remote coaching. It's like, I don't really have time with you.
Yeah.
We can message, we can scale it, we can do things with it. You probably do it better than most, and I probably do it pretty good in the grand scheme of people just sending out workouts.
Yeah.
But you're still missing a big piece.
Yeah. That's what I aim to do with my programs, understanding where most people will fail on a lift, and then priming that pump with specific warm-up targeted at the limitations.
Yep.
As I understand movement, and then within the programs also have a script for them to lead. So coaches viewing them as you got to self-lead yourself. So this week it's grit week. We're focusing on grit.
Yes.
So you can use these scripts personally for yourself, just to hold yourself accountable and keep the mirror up.
Yep.
Or an opportunity for you to then lead your team with this message.
Yeah, we talked about that yesterday, and I love that.
Yeah.
I love it. I love a theme. I love you being proactive in the delivery of that. I mean, no one else is doing that. And it's one of the most valuable lessons outside of like performance and resiliency and robustness that we actually do deliver in the weight room as a strength and conditioning professional. Those are the life lessons that we get the opportunity to deliver day in and day out, which is the real impact.
And so connecting that with the opportunity to relate in low self-awareness, if coaches are allowing their day to affect the pre-practice, pre-workout huddle, and they're just get the guys going, and they miss that message, that's valuable time. If you
dropped the ball,
100%. Because the one common thing that we all have as coaches and teams is like the pre-weight room huddle, pre-practice huddle, and the warm-up.
Yep,
that's it. Everything else can change. The strength, the game plan, the scheme, the game.
Yeah.
All of it can change.
Yep.
But we always can control what we say to begin, and then their warm-up.
Yep.
So taking full advantage of that, and then aiming to steer their performance.
Well, that's what we talk all the time about, especially in a game like baseball. Control the controllables. You can barrel up 10 baseballs as a hitter and get 0 hits. So if you're only focused on the result in a gameplay scenario, you are setting yourself up for disappointment and failure. But if you focus on the things that you can control that are within your actual grasp, then you're going to set yourself up to be significantly more positive and significantly more successful from a psychosomatic standpoint than anything else, And that's exactly what you're saying is like, as a coach, grab the guys. You have this moment. You're not sure. Everything else is going to get responsive and reactive from this point on, but this is the one proactive moment you have.
Yeah.
Why not utilize that?
They don't understand the value, low awareness of
themselves,
their responsibility in themselves.
And it's low-hanging fruit. How hard is this? Follow a Texas script.
It's fun.
Yeah.
So a couple things. I want to move to the theme of now parents.
Okay.
Because parents are paying your bills.
Yes, they are.
So they have a lot of opinions, and I'm sure you have your high amount of stories that you're bringing into it. And so how are you aiming to now shape the behavior of the parents that are paying your bills and the clients?
Yep.
Control the controllables. How many come in with expectations that aren't in line necessarily with what you value or know to be true within sport?
Yeah, almost all of them. Almost every parent, to answer that question. But so I think if you're in the private sector, you're managing 2 journeys, and that's super important to understand from an athlete perspective. You're managing the journey of the athlete, and when I say the journey, I mean how they think, feel, and react with your business or service. And then you're also managing that exact same journey for the parent, but those journeys are completely separate. So every athlete you sign up, you essentially brought on 2 clients. We don't call anybody clients, but 2 clients. It just sounds so transactional to me. So you have to manage both. That's number one. Just an awareness that you have to do both will help so many coaches in the private sector go to another level from a business perspective and from a impact perspective. Number 2, being super clear with expectations and objectives is so important. of course, there's a sales process that we have to account for. We're not going to have a parent walking off the street and say, hey, can you get my son to Vanderbilt? And immediately say no, at least not most of the time, right? There's kind of a way in which that you can deliver a message that doesn't offend the individual, right? And for me, because I'm further along in the process, I can be a little more blunt than maybe a coach just starting out. And I could say something to the effect of like, hey, anything is possible, but just so you know what you're asking for. You're asking for the number one school in the country, and you're asking for your son at 13, where we can't really predict or project where his skill development threshold is just yet. So what you're asking is nearly impossible for me to promise, and within the levels of my integrity, I cannot. That sounds significantly better than your kid sucks. No, right? Or that'll never happen.
Yeah, sure. Sign here.
Yeah, exactly. Or that's that's the alternative that probably many salespeople take is like, absolutely we can. Money back guarantee. Like, right. But yeah, so I think the understanding to, hey, we have to do both journeys. We have to manage both of these, number one. And number two, being clear on expectations. One of the biggest changes for me as a leader, which to me leadership is a lot like coaching, right? There's many factors that directly relate and or mimic one another, right? So when I'm leading my team, the biggest change for me has just been being very clear on expectations and very blunt about the process by which these expectations have to be reached. So I do the same exact thing in a console with a parent. Like, hey, like this is what you can expect from me and my business and our service. This is what we would love to have your son do or your daughter do in order to reach these goals that you've set, that we've worked together to set and kind of made clear. So I think those are the two big ones. Understand you have to manage two journeys, number one. Number two, make sure you're clear and you set those expectations.
I like that. In line with that, how does the conversation change between parent only,
Mm-hmm.
athlete only, and parent athlete sitting in the office with you?
Yeah, you know what's interesting about that is I think you have to be able to literally flip that switch instantaneously. So when we sit down for a consult, we have both the parent and the athlete. It's the only time that the parent is allowed in our facility, right? So we tell them, and again, clear expectations. I don't want to get 3 months in and then you want to pop in for a workout. Hey mom, hey dad, listen, I would love for you to watch today. Watch us go through the assessment, but also if you get a little bored with this stuff, please sneak off and kind of watch our athletes train. This will be the only opportunity you'll have to do that because we don't allow parents on our coaching floor moving forward. Super important that myself and my staff get to bond with your son, your daughter, and also kind of guide them through this process and be one of their biggest advocates. Mm-hmm. But if you're here, that does murky the water around who and what they're supposed to be listening to and looking at for coaching. So please take this in today, and then moving forward, you're not going to be able to, right? So we're clear about that expectation. But then I think in that initial console, you have to be able to switch back and forth, back and forth. And a lot of like the phrasing that I use is I'll say, especially because what'll happen is you'll ask the kid the goal, and then the parent will jump in and give you the goal.
Right.
Again, just very clear, very blunt, but not ignorant, and not in any way, derogatory. Just, hey, Dad, thank you so much. Text, thank you so much. I appreciate that, and I'm tracking with exactly what you're saying. I'd really love to hear your goal, Text Junior, right, about what it is that you'd like to accomplish, because it might be exactly that, but it might also be a little different than Dad's. And let me tell you that that's totally okay, because I can't really understand or help you effectively until we communicate.
Yeah.
That's it. So I think you flip-flop kind of back and forth, right? And any parent that gets, I think, insulted by that, probably not a fit for your business anyway. I hate to say that because everybody can learn and grow. I told you the embarrassing story about Mark Fisher and myself, and I think I've grown a lot from that time, which is 8 or 9 years ago. But yeah.
Yeah. That there was often a time I wanted to like force a lesson on that parent.
Yep.
Now it's more so aimed to ask the questions why.
Yeah.
And then connect with that, or ask them about their athletic background and try to understand the push and the drive for them.
Yep.
To, for lack of a better term, force their goal onto their child.
Yeah. And that's important background information, but also for me, as you go through 10, 12 years of this, you kind of have a feel immediately. right? It's almost a question that doesn't need asked.
Yeah.
You know, if you're telling me you want your son to play at Vanderbilt and you want me to get him there, I know you didn't play Division I baseball. I don't have to ask.
Yeah.
And I almost feel like people get offended when I do. So for me, a lot of times, you know, it's the framing of those questions in an effective manner. And also like using some leading questions too. You know, hey, what about this outside of sport would you like Tex Jr. to derive? You know,
Mm-hmm.
what do you want him to get? Of course, you want him to throw harder, run faster, slash his 60 time, you know, of course, duh. That's why we're here, right? But what outside of this, if there was anything, could you or that we could deliver, would you want him to get? And I think that's a pretty good question that'll point you in the direction of like, hey, is there something outside of sport that this parent really would love to see kind of get carried into their son or daughter's life?
Yeah. The questions I always aim to bring it back to education.
Yeah.
Just as a bias that I loved the opportunity to school and grad school that sport provided me. I couldn't got into Marymount
Yeah.
unless I played lacrosse.
Yep. Stud.
No,
Stud.
just not an interested high school student. So then aim to make a connection to education.
Yeah.
What's your favorite subject in school?
Yeah.
Science, biology. Well, I don't know anything about Vanderbilt, but I would imagine to then find a biology school
Yeah.
or agriculture, right? So I live in a big FFA area,
Okay.
and then Texas A&M.
Yeah.
So there you go. So now, all right, well, cool.
Yeah.
I know, yeah, there's an opportunity there. So,
I love that. You're quite a wordsmith, Tex, I will say.
well, if I'm 5'7" genetic trash can, so I got to walk my way through these conversations
Bench 315.
multiple times in a row. I mean, because my arms are so short. But then I also use self-deprecating humor with the parents.
Yep.
'Cause
Oh,
they
yeah, you got to
joke
have that.
as a D3 All-Star.
Yep.
Because, I mean, they didn't play college ball, but they're now putting their shame on me as a Division III athlete.
Yep.
I tell them I wouldn't trade any of it for the world.
Yeah.
And then I paint the picture of what a Division I athlete day in the life looks like.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, having now coach strength at Division I universities can explain the life cycle there. So maybe I didn't make it,
Yep. But you've been through it.
but I've led athletes through that journey
Yeah.
and on to success. And then the dudes that I've coached through Georgetown, many started in the dawn of the PLL.
Yep.
So then reference that and can make that connection back to, and then
Yep.
athletes that I was able to relate and have a good relationship with to now help craft and arm wrestle these parents into. And this is, as a Houston fan, I love to drop this one because the owner of the Houston Rockets, his name's Fertitta,
Okay.
big business restaurant guy in Houston.
All right.
And so I tell them the story because I went to elementary school with his daughter. So then in passing, knew the family. But then he's got a business book.
Okay.
And so this man owns a freaking NBA team.
Yeah.
He knows what he's doing.
Yeah. He's not doing too bad.
The title of his book, it's called Shut Up and Listen. So then I speak to them about Fertitta and his success in this book.
Yeah.
And then that's me implying and just laying it on there pretty thick here. Just shut up and listen.
Yeah. Yep.
They're fun conversations that I like to have.
Yeah. One of the biggest issues too when you're talking with an athlete in front of the parent is getting the thing, getting the stuff, getting the juice, so to speak, out of the athlete. Because they'll just defer. And I've seen it more and more as these generations kind of move through our facility.
I think you had a bullet point on that in your slide. And then, but I don't know if you touched to it or you were rushing through because you didn't get enough time in your presentation.
Shout out Super Coach Summit.
But yeah, speak to us on that juice. So
Yeah.
what coaches can aim to in a conversation.
Yeah. So the concept that I was introducing in that slide, to go full circle, was like, and this is a concept I introduce to every single class I teach, by the way. I always say bring the juice, but I don't mean, because I'm a hype guy, right? I'm very excitable, right? I speak loud. I'm kind of an extrovert. I'm outgoing, all those things. But I don't think that that's always called on or called for in every situation. So I always say, like, the juice looks a little different. Some days you want cranberry, some days you want orange. You always want the juice, though, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think, so for me, it's like the way I show up for a lecture, to teach a lecture to college students, is pretty different than the way I show up to coach a group of high school athletes. and it's pretty different from the way I'll coach and communicate with a group of pro athletes. I'm always me. I never pretend to be something I'm not, but just the versions of me might be slightly different, right? My tempo, my speed, my expectations, because they're all set, but they're just set differently at every level.
Yeah.
A high school athlete, I'm really happy to see them in the gym. If I get them in there 3 days a week, I'm pumped. If a high school athlete missed a couple workouts, gets back in, I'm excited. If one of my pro athletes misses 2 workouts and comes back in, I'm going to let him have it for probably the whole hour of the session, every chance I get.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, and like a student, same idea. Like, you mentioned you're a disinterested high school kid. We have disinterested college students.
Yep.
So for me, it's like I want to meet the student where they are. And I also want to engage the students so they're not so disinterested anymore. Hey, is there a way that I can make this interesting for you? I can't change the coursework, right? But is
Yeah.
there a way that I can relate this back to something that interests you, that brings you alive, and maybe re-engages you in the coursework and in the class? So I think like the expectations are different, the juice is different, but you always got to bring it. You can never show up flat.
No. That's awesome. I like that. So I want to lean into assumptions
Yeah.
that you had as a leader. So your first time either leading your team,
Yep.
what assumptions were put on you? What assumptions did you have as an athlete?
Yeah, so from an athlete perspective, the biggest assumption was that I could say and do the work and everyone else would implicitly follow.
Mm-hmm.
They would copy it, that's not true, right? That's not how that works. That's not how leadership works. But that was my initial assumption being a leader. So I was a freshman captain at Shenandoah, which was cool. Yep.
Whoa.
Yep. So I'm like,
Kind
hey,
of a big deal.
yeah, I know, yeah. So it's like I'm gonna go ahead and just work my ass off, and everyone will do it. And then you're in the weight room 8 p.m. and no one's in there with you. Wait a second. What's going on here, right? Because again, the assumption piece, right? You're assuming you make an ass out of you and me, right? So that was the biggest assumption. From a business perspective, when I brought on a team of coaches, the biggest assumption I made as a leader is everybody wanted it just as much as me. They wanted growth and they wanted development just as much as me. Then you start to realize like you're the one that opened the business.
Right.
You're the one with skin in the game, which again, we have strategies, like business strategies around like getting people invested, right?
Mm-hmm.
But initially that was an assumption that like everyone would just fall in line. Everyone was going to want it as much as me. Everyone was going to be there at 4:30 a.m. and leave at 10. Neither of those are true.
So then what was there a moment that led to that or just months of stressing and realizing, oh man.
There was a gradual gradient shift, which I wish there was a moment, right? There's like, what happens is, at least for me, my experience was that you get one team member from a business perspective or one team member on your team that shows up with you. You're like, oh, it's starting to change. But really, you just kind of made a lucky shot. Like, you just got lucky, right?
And they enabled your thinking
to stay
a little bit farther.
Yep, just to stay where you were. So there's this like slow gradient shift to finally realizing a truth. And that hard truth is that you're going to need a lot more leadership ability and a lot more hard conversations than you've ever really wanted to have to effectively lead. And you're going to need to set clear expectations, and you're going to need to set a very high standard. And then you're going to need to check in with those individuals and hold them accountable to the standard you set. And that's what real leadership looks like, at least in my mind. And unfortunately, it took literally years in my business for me to finally flip that switch.
And your reflection stage on that and the gradient slow burn to get there.
Pain.
What lessons were right there in front of your face as a student athlete that you're like, oh man, I learned this, or I should have learned this?
Yeah, well, that was the problem. I didn't, right? It was right in front of my face. Like, hey, if you don't set a real expectation that's concrete, right? That's binary almost, right? Hey, 0 or 1, right? Like 1, you're here, 0, you're not. It's not you wanted to be there and something got brought up or whatever the case would be. Until you set that true binary standard, you can't expect anyone to do anything because again, you're back to this assumption gradient. That assumption gradient will literally, it'll burn you bad.
Yeah.
For a long time, and it did, and it burned my business for a long time, where it was like, we would run through interns, we'd run through employees almost. And, I got lucky. I have an employee that's been with me since the very beginning still. And literally, it's almost his fault that I burned so slow because he's awesome. And sometimes you just get an ace, and you're like, he'll figure it out. And he does. But the problem is that's not true leadership. That's not even good leadership, right? That's as a matter of fact, I probably slowed his trajectory down because I wasn't as effective as a leader as I could be.
Well, always opportunity and time to change.
Always. That's what coaching is, right? That's what
exactly. So in that's something we're going after. Like you experienced those lessons as a student athlete.
Yep.
And so we hear this all over that sports teach lessons.
Yeah.
Football taught me how to be a man. That's an assumption. We're going after it, that sports don't teach lessons. Captains and coaches do.
Yep.
So
I love that.
Yeah, with now in your the position as coach, as the senior leader within your team, and just, hey, this is my perspective on this. So now think back to your young age as an athlete.
Yeah.
And the lessons that coaches aimed to teach you. So how do you, now dealing with still hard-headed 13, 18 professional year-old athletes, apply your perspective so they can listen?
Yeah.
Or you hope so?
Yeah, I hope so, right? I hope so. I think, you just said football taught me how to be a man, right? I think for me...
Not me, but...
No, I know. That's like an implicit assumption around football, right? I think if I had to put a finger on like one thing that sports in general taught me is that leadership is a requirement and leadership is not passive, right? And this is kind of what we're discussing, and we're using other words. We're kind of playing some like word salad here, but it won't just occur, right? It won't just happen. So there needs to be strategy. There needs to be tactics. There needs to be really, really hard conversations that occur at a micro level and also at a macro level. And like within a team structure now, within the business, for me, we're having micro conversations every day. You saw my team here. My team is, some of my team is at the event. We're having conversations about what I expect from them in the room, what I expect from them from a questions perspective, what I expect from them outside of there, right? And it's not to say to micromanage your team. It's to say when they're young and when they're coming on, you have to do a little micromanaging, a little clear communication up front, and then allow for that to self-organize later on down the road. So I think when we bring an athlete in, when we onboard an athlete, it's the same thing. We have to be really, really implicit early on about the exact behaviors that we're looking for them to demonstrate and what it really looks like for them to first be led and then to take on a leadership role later. So I don't know if I really answered the question, but I do think that leadership won't just happen. It's not a passive pursuit. And it is something that we need to look to instill, number one, but also practice first, number two.
Yeah, that still using the warm-up. Every single lacrosse practice that I lead, it's using that warm-up to give somebody a voice.
Yeah.
So now instead of me calling out the count or the next exercise, just go up. Ryan, four count push-ups on you. Ready. And then he hits the count. So the aim there is now freshmen are leading up to seniors. Seniors are leading down, and everybody's listening to everybody.
Yep.
And it's as simple as a count. So then in respect to business now, what are some small responsibilities that you start to handle or hand off to your team? Do you have a hierarchy that gradually goes up to then managing their own facility?
We do, yeah. That's our facility leaders. So from a business perspective, and I don't want to make this into a business chat, right? But from a business perspective, one of the most important things I ever learned is it's impossible to scale complexity. So all of our systems are very, very clear, number one, but also very like elementary in that we have two positions within, well, three really. We have three positions within our business. We have a director. A director is a facility leader who runs a program. We have a coach. That's someone who coaches. And then we have an intern. And that's your hierarchy, right? Mm-hmm. An intern reports directly to a coach reports directly to a director. Director reports directly to me as CEO visionary.
Well, all I'm hearing is this is a coaching staff. We got our head coach, we got our coordinators, we got our assistants or specialists.
Yep, that's it.
And if you're lucky, you get an intern.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. So Everybody down that chain of command has responsibilities. And I don't know if you call them small in terms of, how important they are to our business, but I would say there's less responsibilities at each step of that chain, right? An intern's responsibility is to get there, to learn, and then to practice our culture, right? A coach is really there to help the intern be able to effectively demonstrate our culture and then effectively demonstrate our culture within themselves to then pass that on to our athletes. Mm-hmm. A director is there to lead the coach in such a way and support the coach in such a way that they can do their job and also to grow the program.
Right.
That's kind of what we do from a micro or a macro level. Micro responsibility. Every team meeting we run, this is like a really big piece, by the way. Every single team meeting we run, every single person on our team speaks. Sounds silly. You'd be shocked at how many meetings you go to within businesses where only one person talks. And it's essentially a lecture, right? By the way, that's also how I teach. Every single student in my classes talks. Every class.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. And if they don't, I'm like, what is wrong? Like, is everything okay? We're trying to drive communication. We're trying to drive some level of autonomy within a team structure, mm-hmm. right? Which I think is super important from a business growth perspective. I forget what the question was, by the way, but yeah, that's how we set it up.
You're talking business. I'm aiming to connect it to sport.
Yeah.
It's all
okay.
Yeah. It's all the theme, though.
Yeah.
In leadership, the aim is we want still coaches to make the connections of, hey, you were experiencing this struggle, this strife, this organization, this direction, this opportunity to lead your team, because it's going to prepare you for exactly XYZ in school or business.
Yeah.
So the aim is just to shine a light on this stuff, create awareness of what lessons sports are actually teaching, and where specifically they're going to prepare you for the real world, not assuming you're playing this, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Right? In line with you were a freshman captain. Now, that prepared you for business, period, end of story. That's the presentation, button it up, see ya. Yes. I don't need 20 minutes, I need 2.
Yep.
Or,
yeah,
I fucked everything up. I was given an opportunity, but I was smart enough to listen to experience.
Yeah.
And I don't know your coaching staff if they were helping you along the way or just, oh, you're the hardest working, go hard.
Yep.
Here's responsibility.
Yeah, I think it was a bit of both, where, hey, I think from their perspective is like, this kid's working really hard and we want to reward the behavior we want to see. With that being said, I don't know that they were preparing me for leadership as much as they were rewarding effort. Yeah.
Well, that's cerebral now.
Yeah. Yeah. Then I didn't know. Yeah. Of course.
Yeah. Willing the team to act like you. Yeah. Behavior's a deep dive we're going to save for next conversation, shining light and bring some awareness. One thing for me personally, I want to understand, aim to at least, the yips.
Yeah.
So, I mean, growing up, famously, Chuck Knobloch had it, Yankees second baseman.
Yep.
And then most recently, Astros Altuve, he had it for like a whole year.
Yeah.
Where he was batting DH because he couldn't throw to first base.
Yeah.
And that's a short distance.
Yeah, it's not far.
It's not far. So let's just keep his bat, and he can help the team the way he knows how to.
Yeah.
And not hurt the team.
Yeah.
Like where does it start? Where would you aim to lead an athlete back to their full potential?
Yeah, it's such a hard thing to understand because from an outside perspective, do the thing. Do what you've always done. At the Altuve level, you're here. Do what you've always done. But it's deeply ingrained from a psychosomatic perspective, and there's an emotional kind of overlay that starts to develop as it progresses, as this idea, this concept of the yips progresses. So it starts out as a couple of bad throws or errant throws, and it develops into this essentially all-encompassing disorder that is nearly impossible to shake. So if I were to work with an athlete and try to reverse engineer that, that's exactly what I would do. I would start with the lowest level task that looks like, or maybe doesn't even look like, what we're trying to ultimately accomplish, and try to slowly rebuild the self-esteem and the confidence of the athlete. So it might be the simplest of concepts ever on the field. Hey, stand right here and wrist flip this baseball back to first base, whatever it is, right? And then so on and so forth. And then we grade that exposure just like any other, phobia. Higher, more aggressive, more intense, with more on the line as you go. That's what I would do. I've been lucky enough not to work with anyone with the yips severely. We've had some guys that started to get down that path, and we were able to address it with what I just talked about, that graded exposure piece. Like, hey, let's do it in a safe environment with nothing on the line, and like a regressed, a rudiment version of what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
And then we'll slowly work out more intense, more on the line, more intense, more on the line, higher velocity. Yep.
Yeah.
Which is, by the way, like a rehab model too.
And everything's connected.
Yep.
And so in line with that, this magic's in the editing. I forgot where I was going to go. I was just too in tune listening.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly what we do with training and with freaking rehab, man.
Yeah.
Reverse engineer. That's what we were just talking about.
Yeah.
It's like, how can you, in a rehab setting, right? How can you address the highest level neurological component as early as possible, right? So, if a guy or a girl has an injured shoulder, right? Well, what can they do from a high-speed neural perspective on day one? And that's, by the way, where the current rehab model misses, is that they don't introduce anything high speed because they feel as if load comes before velocity, when in reality, those are two separate gradient scales. They are not, they have an interplay, but they're not interconnected on the same level, on the same scale.
So what's some potential damage that can be done by not understanding concept?
I think, number one, you're slowing down the progression of the athlete, right? You're taking them out of the thing they love so much. And what we're talking about is life lessons through sport. You're taking them out of the opportunity to learn those lessons, to learn what it means to lead, to learn what it means to be put into a position to lead, to learn what it means to work hard, to earn something, to not be given something, right? So that's the biggest thing for me, number one. But also, number two, from a confidence standpoint, right? You're taking an athlete who only knows how to do X, Y, or Z, and maybe that's the only area of their life that they really excel in, right? This is where they're the big shit. And you're pulling that away from them. And then you're slowing their return to that. I mean, that's catastrophic on several levels. So I think that those are kind of the big things that I wish the rehab industry understood that or explored that more. And that's what, us in the know or whatever, that's what we do.
Well, and that's why you get the opportunity to work with the highest
Yep.
of levels, and they trust you over anybody.
Yep. They definitely, and I love what was said today, is like, they believe me first, but then they trust me once you've made impact, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the highest compliment an athlete can give you or a parent can give you, is their trust, right? That's something I tell all of our parents. One of the things I always say to our parents, when they say anything, kid commits, a kid hits a PR, runs a great 60 time, whatever, thank you so much for everything you've done. I say two things. All I do is hold a clipboard. That's literally the first thing I always say is, hey, I hold a clipboard where I draw the map, they followed it. That's the first thing I say. And the second thing I say is, thank you so much for your trust, because the options are endless, including, to your earlier point, not training at all. Not doing strength and conditioning or strength and power or strength and speed or speed and agility training. That's also an option. There's elite athletes in every sport that don't train. Yeah. You have outsiders. How do they do that? That's a question about, what you believe in.
Yeah, they have to work not to be there.
Correct.
That's how gifted they are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is real.
And gifts. That's I mean to say all that to say, depending on what your belief system is, like who bestows those gifts, I'm not sure.
Which this is the question I wanted to get to that I forgot.
Awesome.
But luck. Do you believe in luck?
No, luck's not real.
So, I mean, superstition is everywhere.
Yeah, baseball's
in sport,
huge.
Especially baseball.
Yep.
So is it the same process of talking a guy away from yips to talking them away from luck, or is that just a battle you don't worry about?
I never concern myself with the concept of luck. If an athlete concerns themselves with the concept of luck, I'll introduce the concept of routine
Oh, all
in
right.
place of luck, right? So everybody in baseball, you have the crazy kind of outsiders with their routines and rituals and stuff. Nomar Garcia-Parra
No
sticks out
more.
to me. Yeah, exactly. Yep. Yeah, he sticks out to me with the batting gloves. Um, it's okay to have a ritual. It's okay to have a routine. I challenge athletes consistently that when they're playing games that are quote unquote less important or with opportunities that are quote unquote less important to get outside of their rituals and routines.
Mm-hmm.
Challenge yourself to not do that. Just see, just check it out. Why not? If the stakes are less, just try. Because what I want you to do, and as an athlete later on in my career, in college, actually, I got so caught up in superstition and routine. I never want any athlete to be there, right?
Oh,
So, yeah, so my junior year of college, I remember specifically every time I went to hit in the fall, I used a different bat. Just grab a bat off the rack.
anybody random.
It doesn't matter. Size didn't matter. I was like, let's ride. So one at bat, I'd swing a 34. Next at bat, I'd swing a 32. I'm like, I'll just figure it out. It's fine. I'm adaptable. I'm an athlete. And that was a belief that actually served me really, really well. And down the stretch there, and it serves me well now in business too. Oh, even coaches have it, right? I don't have my coaching shoes on. I forgot my polo. I'm ready to coach whenever.
I've never heard that.
I just told an Olympic athlete just now as we walked through that hallway. I said, I was skipping a talk, don't tell anybody. And he was hanging out in the hallway. And he said, you okay? I said, yeah, I just need a breather. My brain gets kind of overloaded and I need to take some breaks because otherwise I won't digest anything. I said, the only thing I'm always ready to do is coach. He's like, yeah, you ready to coach? I was like, yeah, you want to go to the track? I'm ready to roll right now. I don't care. But only because I have a belief in myself. I have a kind of a core concept of adaptability.
Mm-hmm.
And I developed that through sport by pushing myself outside of rituals and routines. So it's okay to have a routine. That's okay, especially if that routine serves you. But I think when that routine becomes an anchor to your growth, that's when you need to start to challenge it and break it down.
Yeah. So if you notice those patterns and behaviors within the high schoolers,
Jump on them.
jump on them.
Absolutely, yeah. Like if an athlete's like, "Well, I would have done better if I had my bat." No, you wouldn't have. Just straight up. No, you
Calling
wouldn't have.
that out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you wouldn't have. Probably not.
Uh-huh.
Yep. Or, if it's really tough, if it's a tough thing to overcome, I might say like, I'm really sorry you feel that way, but I'd like to challenge your belief around that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Finding a way. I mean, any behavior that you foresee as disruptive long term down the line,
Yep.
it's got to be called out and aimed to be shaped.
Yep. And the sooner the better.
Yeah.
The deeper it gets, the harder it is to shake.
Well, yeah, it's a lot of call it palms up behavior in lacrosse. Like you got a bad call against you or
Yeah.
something happened.
Yeah.
Palms are up against to the ref.
Yep.
That body language from 100 yards away, it's undeniable.
Yeah.
So aiming to teach a lot of body language, and me as sport and strength and conditioning coach, if you are resting on your knees, your body language is telling me you're tired and
tired.
you need more conditioning.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Right.
Fight sports are the best for body language
Dude,
communication.
we
So
didn't
fun.
even begin to get into your fight coaching experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll touch on that briefly.
Okay.
So what are some body language behaviors, things that you're looking for in that individual athlete sport?
Yeah, individual athlete sports are significantly better at this, right? Because you can't hide. There's nowhere to
No.
go. There's nowhere to hide, right? You're in the ring. You could tell. Eye contact and eye control are two of the big ones for me, right? Where is the athlete looking? Where is their focus, right? And then in between, when there is moments for breaks, whether it's between rounds or even in moments of disengagement, right? Hey, I'm going to double jab out here and create some space. Where does the athlete glance? The athlete is not focused on the opponent and a specific part of the opponent based on the strategy. That'll change a little bit slightly. And people that are interested in fights and stuff like that, it's a different conversation, right? Like depending on the size of the opponent, based on the style of the opponent, we might be focused on a different part of their body when you're fighting. So when you're not looking them eye to eye most of the time. But But again, like if your eyes are all over the place, right? Yeah, you may be concussed because I know somebody's listening to this saying, "Oh, that person's got a concussion." Maybe they just got punched in the head. They might, right? But also, they may be fatigued, physically or mentally or emotionally or all three. And it's a conversation at least. It's a thought process at least. And if you're the coach in the corner, you need to understand where that athlete is. One of the hardest things to do as a fight coach is to throw in the towel, right? Because the truth of the matter is, if you pull an athlete out of a fight, you're fired. And that's kind of the truth 98% of the time. You throw in that towel for an athlete, you're probably going to get fired, right? So it's up to you. You want to talk about like coaching hierarchies and concepts of selflessness. You're giving up your relationship at some level with the athlete to save the athlete from themselves by throwing in that towel, which is, for me, very poetic. But I'm also a poetic guy. And I have this emotional connection to coaching in that way too, where I'm like, if I were to write my coaching credo, I would want to write it in blood, like I'm passionate about it to that level. So I do like the fight sports because of those things. Like an emotional connection to coaching and fighting is normal.
Yeah.
Whereas in team sport, it's not that it's not normal, but it would be less normal, I'd say. Normalized.
Yeah, different energy, different vibe, and
For sure.
There's a greater margin for error in team sport.
For sure.
We have multiple games this season
And you have support.
versus
Yeah.
the big match, the big opportunity, the one.
Yep. Yeah, we fight on ESPN. We're in Vegas 4 or 5 weeks ago. We don't know when our next fight is. It's the truth of the matter, So we have to live, the whole team and the fighter have to live with the outcome that came.
Yeah. And then you get the opportunity to help him develop and continue to guide and grow. Just being there for him and having the relationship, and now continuing to guide his growth.
Yeah, that's what we do for coaching, man. That's why we coach.
Yeah.
That's ultimately, you coach because you want to move people, right? That's what I was discussing, impact, right? For me, it's like, it's two things. It's the mortality of your coaching role, right? Knowing that your role will eventually end and that's okay. Number one. And then number two, understanding that the ultimate goal is to leave a coaching legacy in each individual athlete you work with. That's something that you taught them. And hopefully it's not sprint technique, right? Like hopefully that's not what you left, but something that you left them you want to live on. And that's my poetic kind of stance on coaching. That's what I want to do. I know every relationship will end because I'm not going to be here forever. The athlete is not going to be here forever. We might have a falling out for other purposes other than death, but every relationship will end. However, you have the opportunity every day to potentially create a legacy or a mark, a dent. I always talk to my staff about like create a dent, right? Create a dent within that athlete's mindset framework that lives on beyond your relationship.
Mic drop.
Yeah, it's pretty much how I get down.
Yeah, let's wrap it there. This is what happens when you get more than 20 minutes to have a conversation.
Weird, Cav. Yeah.
Brief call. CJ, awesome. I appreciate you. I met you a year ago at the same event. I'm grateful for that. And
Dude, I'm grateful as hell for you, man.
The connection over all these months, and then moments like this, we get to come hang out.
Yeah, dude. I will say this for your listeners. I learned something from you in every conversation we have, which is powerful stuff because, as I said, I skip a lot of talk. But to just have like a passing conversation, even over beers last night, and to learn something. And like for me at this point, and you too, like we're pretty far along this journey. Like sometimes like a phrase is like what you put in the notebook.
It's sticky.
Yeah.
I got plenty of
Yeah.
Here I wrote, what do I got? Yips. That was my note. Control the controllables.
Yeah.
I'll just leave with that one because that's all I can read on this scribble. I circled co-contraction for some reason.
Oh, yeah. We were talking co-contraction before we were on camera. We might have been on camera, actually. Yeah, co-contraction's interesting concept that we use in rehab. To put it simply, in an athlete perspective, is like, hey, getting all the musculature around a given joint to contract in such a way that they support one another. I'll say that. I'm down to do another episode.
Oh yeah, yeah. We'll get Celian in on this, and
Dude, yeah. If him and I go together, we can fucking make fun of each other too.
that's what we do here. Locker room talk. All right, CJ, where should they go to definitely follow you? This is a must follow.
Yeah, so I'm at Appy Hour everywhere. That's important.
APPY?
APPY Hour. It's just happy hour with no H.
There you go. I'm just quoting Happy Gilmore. Yeah, happy written on his ass.
Yep, that's
HAPPY.
That's it, man. Just no H and you're there.
Yeah. Yes. All right, dude. Man, I appreciate you.
I appreciate
another episode.
Thanks, guys. Hell
yeah.
It.
All right, and scene.
How'd I do, man?
Great. I don't know how long we went, but
we rocked it.
Good.